Okay, okay. This microphone on. We got a different setup here. I moved my entire studio to a different room of the house. So we're going to do a little trial run on the new setup. I got OBS working, and hopefully we're streaming live on Instagram right now. I don't know if we are. I'm about to pull up my phone and test. So this is going to be a little bit of a trial and error show. This stuff was working. All this technology was working a few months ago when I was doing streams on a regular basis, but I haven't used it since then. And I had to go into the back end and update passcodes and stuff. So we need to find out now, is this working or not? So that's the point of this stream today, testing the technology. And if I find that the technology is working as I need it to be, then we may actually go into a couple headlines and have a whole happy hour session, which I'm happy to do. Drama Alert Nation, what do you stand for, bro? You got that Giat Riz W. What does that even mean? That's like Gen Z talk. I don't know what that means. What do I stand for? Misha 420i. I stand for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ being the only way to God. I'm a very devout Christian, and I stand for the white race as an advocate of our people, somebody who believes that white people are entitled to their own nations and protections the same way every other race deserves their own nations to live in a protected way indefinitely for the rest of time. So that's what my platform is about, if you haven't heard that before. I was trying to pull up my Instagram on my phone to see if I was live, but I'm thinking I probably am if we got chats in here, right? Um, how can I check this? Because it's like logged in simultaneous places. I think at one point I used my iPad to see if I was live. Is that a possibility? Hold on. Let's take a look. I got this giant ass 12.9-inch screen over here. Log in. Oh, but what I'm afraid of is if I log in on my iPad, it might kick me off of this stream. So, what do you guys think I should do? I don't know. I mean, I have to think that we're working, right? You guys in chat? You guys in chat, drop in the numbers 123. Just type in 123 if you can hear me and let me know that this is working correctly. I think it is, but I don't know. You guys might just be spam bots saying whatever auto generated artificially intelligenced comments into chat. I don't know. I wonder if I go look at my web browser, does it show that I'm streaming live? What does it show? What does it show? Dun, 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 dun. Oh, it does show that I'm live. Okay, that's what I really needed to see. That's very, very good news. Okay. So if I'm streaming live, I can get my chat back up. Where was that? And get my OBS pulled back up. And maybe talk about a couple things that are on my mind. I'm trying to figure out how I can see how many people are streaming. I did this before at some point, and I can't remember how. Chat back up. Can I kill the sound on this? Okay, so it shows 4 people live now. Okay. I want to make sure we don't get an echo. Thank you for bearing with me through these technical connections here. Like I said, it's been a couple months since I did a live stream. For a while, I had my home office upstairs set up with all the lighting and the green screen and all that kind of stuff. And it was great and I was enjoying it. But then I got kind of into doing stuff for you guys that was a little bit more polished with more production value. I wanted to make those documentaries. And, of course, that started with Is Racism a Sin? That was my first documentary, which, by the way, is up to about 2,000 views on YouTube, which is nowhere near enough. I'm happy that 2,000 people, have watched it, but we need millions of people to watch that documentary. So it's your responsibility as my follower to go and watch that if you haven't. And even if you have watched it, you need to make sure your friends watch it, because we have to be very clear on this whole racism word that is thrown around to basically hurt white people's own interests and nobody else's. Other people aren't struggling with racist accusations. People who are black in America, people who are Hispanic, Jews, etc., they're not the ones having to say, look, we're not racist. We just have our own priorities. And there's nothing immoral about that. You know, when a black person says, I want to be an advocate for the black community, we have a particular past and a heritage, traditions and whatnot that we want to maintain. We don't want to become white people. We don't want to become Jews. We don't want to become anybody else. We'd like to stay black people. Well, guess what? White people have that same desire too. We would like to keep our white culture, and we would like to keep our white nations and our white ways of life that are different than other ways of life. I don't think Arabs would disagree that Western white world is different. You know, the world built by white people ended up being a different world than the world built by Arab people. And a lot of this is inextricably connected to religion, and that the Western world was built atop of Christianity and the Middle Eastern world was built atop of Islam. And choosing one or the other for your own preference, where you want to live, doesn't make you a bad person. If you're a white person saying, I like these countries that are majority white, that at the majority level practice Christianity, that doesn't make you Islamophobic, and it doesn't make you anti-Semitic, and it doesn't make you racist or a bigot or xenophobic or a white supremacist or a neo-Nazi or a domestic terrorist, blah, 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 blah. This is why you need to watch my film, Is Racism a Sin? A Racial Reckoning, because we need to get to the point in America and in the entire European world that there is nothing wrong with us wanting to preserve and protect our nations. And we recommend Middle Eastern Arabs do the same, and we recommend that Asians do the same, and we recommend Africans do the same. We're all entitled to that. We just need to be able to do so in separate protected spaces. So that's what I stand for, one of the first questions asked in chat. So as I was explaining, I used to do these streams on a pretty regular basis, sometimes a few nights a week, and just covering the weekly news cycle, you know, whatever's going on. But I kind of shifted gears towards doing more polished production with these documentaries. I did Is Racism a Sin? And then like within 1 or 2 weeks, I dropped the second documentary, America and Israel, Jesus and Judas, because that happened to be the week of October 7th. And I wasn't planning on doing a whole documentary about Israel. You know, it's obviously a common trend, the Jews and the history of Judaism and the Talmud and all that stuff. That's a common trend in trying to achieve a white, self-governed white Christian nation with no Jewish influence, no Islamic influence, no Hindu influence, Buddhist influence, no Freemasonry influence, just a purist white Christian nation. Well, we know the most organized effort that opposes that currently in the world is Zionism. And so this kind of leads me into one of the things I wanted to talk about, and that I think all Christian nationalists who want white preservation recognize that the number one organized opposition to that is Zionism. Some might argue that it's globalism and that it's the New World Order, the World Economic Forum. The other explanation is Alex Jones's. It's not even his particularly. There's somebody else who created it before him. But it's the whole, yes, the Jews are disproportionately represented in all of these civil institutions. The government, the media, the banking industry, the education, higher education, academia world. Yes, Jews are disproportionately occupying all those roles and thus exerting disproportionate influence on society. And if you're having a Jewish influence on society, that's different than having a Christian influence on society. And if that's happening across all of our civil institutions, then of course, the moral fabric of our country is going to move in that direction and not in the Christian direction. This is just very, very easy to understand. I don't think I need to go into further detail. Hopefully not. It's not anti-Semitism. It's not hating Jews. It's not wanting any harm to Jews, not an incitement to violence, but to say that the Jewish influence in America is real, no pun intended, but that it is real. And if you're a Christian, then that's fundamentally opposed to your own religious values and your own moral framework, which comes from the word of Jesus, not from the words in the Talmud. And it doesn't come from the Quran, which would be obviously the Islamic faith's moral framework. So these are meaningful differences across the religions. And so when you have people who have these very, very different views on the world in terms of where does morality come from, does it come from the Quran? Does it come from the New Testament? Does it come from the Talmud? You can't have those people living on top of each other, practicing different social frameworks, completely different gender roles, completely different rules around marriage and divorce and views on abortion, views on homosexuality, views on feminism, views on multiculturalism. It's an unsustainable model to ever think that putting all those people in the same space who want to live in dramatically different ways is going to turn out in a peaceful society. That's just not going to happen. So that's why I did the second documentary, America and Israel, Jesus and Judas, was to talk about how it does matter if you have a Zionist government in a country that is not a Jewish country, how then you are at fundamental odds with your own government. And so that was the second documentary. And then we quickly did a third documentary, which is much less controversial. That was The Serene Rights of Manhood. And I really, really enjoyed that as kind of a personal project. And it was nice to be less controversial because these subjects are much more like just traditional truths across all religions, other than the first one being that you have to put your full faith in the gospel rather than anything else. One moment, I got a tickle in my throat. I got to cough and drink something. I apologize. Mm. This is my pre-workout, by the way. This is my happy hour that I've often reminded you guys of how beneficial it's been in my life to take the hour before I go to the gym. Normally it's me sitting in my car, but now that it's gotten colder, it's not very fun to sit in your car in a cold parking lot. So I'm doing my happy hour at home, but this is the hour where I sit here and think about world affairs and politics and religion, what's going on with the culture in our country, and what needs to be done about it. You guys, I don't know what's going on, man. Can I just can I just speak freely? Do I got the Mossad of over here putting something in my C4 pre-workout? Man, are we good now? So my happy hour where I sit down and think about the world and my influence on it and how to try to change things, put things on a better trajectory than they are now, bring back the Christian majority, make sure we don't lose the white majority. In fact, we need to correct the ratio. That's been a hot topic in my DMs. The how do we get back to a white majority? And this is a conversation that is more nuanced than people take from the surface argument. Like when you make the America First, Nick Fuentes argument, we got to have a white majority. What people think that that means, and I think this is how Nick understands it as well. I've never heard him articulate it further, more practically, more tangibly, in terms of like, okay, let's talk about the 50 states of the United States of America. Let's talk about borders. Let's talk about immigration policy, demographic policy, miscegenation laws, interracial marriage, all that stuff. How do you tangibly get back to a 85 to 90%, what we would call a supermajority of the white population? And as America currently stands, only being 60% white, there would have to be some dramatic shifts in a number of things for us to get back to being a country of 330 million people, which we are now, but you're trying to get back to a 90% majority. So there's like 10, 20, 30% of the people in America, which would be what? 100 million people, are going to have to be displaced, meaning sent to other countries, or you're going to have to dramatically increase the population by importing a ton of white people. Like, you'd have to basically not see any kind of population growth in the minority groups, but see extreme population growth in the white majority. And we have a current negative birth rate in the white population. So that's not realistic. What I foresee actually happening, and this is something that would help us move toward a model where if you want a Christian moral framework in your society, we have that for you. But if that's not what you want, we don't have to come to vicious, violent warfare over this. We have an entire continent of space to figure this problem out. And so my suggestion is, let me pull up a post I made a couple months ago where I proposed a model, a rearrangement of America that would accommodate everybody in a way that allows them to opt into what religious government or secular government they would want to live under, as well as how much ethnic diversity they would want to live amongst. So I got that pulled up. I'll share it on my screen here and try to scroll up. Can I make some adjustments here to help you see that? How's that going to look? But you see that map right there. This is just, a first draft. I've talked about this on my show before, but it's a conversation starter to let people think of a potential way of reorganizing the country in a way where if you want a Christian government and you want to be around only white people, which, by the way, those are the two most important things in terms of securing the future existence of the white race and the morality that must take place in a world that cares about God and that wants to see God's will on earth, God being Jesus Christ. That's what, my platform is specifically meant to represent. And so that would be that kind of bluish slice of America. And that would be for all white Christians. And then you can see in the southeast, that purple area there, that would be for all Christians who think diversity is great, or for whatever reason, they just prefer to live in a more mixed ethnic culture. That's great. We're not going to say that we're better morally than you and you're not morally better than us just because you like living around different ethnicities. What we're going to do is allow people to opt in. We're going to say, we agree that Christianity is our moral framework, but we disagree about diversity, so there's a place for both of us. And that's how we make sure Christianity, by the overwhelming majority, is the majority representation in the country. And then you can see there on the far west coast, you have an area for the people who in the country who, unfortunately, we just have to acknowledge the truth that there's going to be a large demographic, including white people, in America who do not want to give up diversity and who don't want to adopt Christianity. And so we're not trying to hurt people here, okay? What we're trying to do is to get people living amongst people like themselves so there's less conflict. And so we'll create the space for them. And right now, I would imagine, probably be the West Coast, in the same way that the Southeast is probably best for the ethnically diverse community that are Christian, because that's where the majority of the Black population are. It just makes sense. Now, I have been having a conversation with some other white folk who say, I'm white, I only want to live around whites, and I do have a problem, however, with being forced to live under Christianity. So which section is for me? I don't want to live amongst diversity, purple section, who are my fellow Christians, but look, I want to live around whites. And, well, the problem is the rest of the country is only two other sections, which is you have to live under Christianity, or you have to live in full-fledged Sodom and Gomorrah ethnic diversity hell of the West Coast. So that's a fair call out. And that's when I do a draft 2.0 of this map, I'm going to create a fourth area that is allocated specifically for only whites, but any religious practice. And that will allow them to evolve in parallel. They can watch with binoculars over the fence the Christian-only society that is also all white, and this will be an amazing social experiment to watch unfold. We'll get to see just how valuable is a pure white demographic, because this is essentially using the scientific method of only adjusting one variable at a time. Well, if the only variable between these two countries that are progressing side by side is they're both fully white, but one of them is Christianity, one of them is Freemasonry, paganism, atheists. You got Jews, you got Christians, you got Hindus, you got Buddhists, you got Muslims, all living amongst each other, but you keep the race consistent, all white. Well, what does a society look like then? We can do this experiment. And it's beautiful because it allows people, as I said before, to choose which one of these things they value the most and live in a land where everybody else agrees with them for the most part. And I understand there's going to be people who ask questions like, well, why isn't there a white Jewish only section? Why isn't there a black only section? Blah, blah, blah. Listen, this country was founded by whites. It was founded by Christians. And I'm talking before the founding fathers, before the 1776 American Revolution, that was fully authored by, financed by, and encouraged by atheist, Freemasons, Jewish influenced backed people. I'm talking about the original settlers of 1620 who came here on the Mayflower. Within the Mayflower Compact, it was specifically written, this is to be a Christian country for the purpose of delivering the gospel to the New World. And those people were obviously white from Europe. Those are the founding stock people of America for its first 150 years, who I believe infused this country with the DNA that set it up to succeed in the way that it has. And so we're going to prioritize those initial seeds, the things that put America on the map, made it so successful, and that's what we believe our North Star is, the fusion of European culture and Christian morality. Not to mention, it's also just consistent with the current majorities. At the time, whites are still the current majority. At the time, Christianity is still the majority. Understandingly, both of these things are on the downward trend, unfortunately, but that's the point of me having a platform. That's the point of America First. That's the point of doing missionary work as a Christian, is to make sure these things don't continue in that direction, because we don't think society is better in either of those directions. So what else can I say here? I need to check chat, make sure I haven't missed anything. Oh, so yeah, I got to finish this pre-workout, and then we'll be headed to the gym. It's going to be yesterday was chest day. I got to do legs today. I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving, by the way. I was out of town. I drove over, my dad and my stepmom and I drove over to Georgia, where we have some family, and got to basically hang out in a lake house for the week. And it was great. It really was. You know, we got about an acre and a half plot of land on a lake. So Gilbert and the other dog that was there could just run free, have a good time. Bee dogs, bark, chase each other, pee on bushes, watch the fish in the lake. And on that note, your man here, Josh, I got to catch my very first fish. That's a public confession. I had never caught a fish before in my life for 37 years until last Thursday, 3 days ago. That's when I caught my very first fish. I caught, I don't even know what they're called, brim, I think, or something. I don't know. And the next day I caught a catfish, though. I ended up catching 3 fish over 2 days and only about 2 hours of fishing, maybe even less than that. And I got to say, it was very enjoyable. It was peaceful and relaxing. You just kind of hang out, watch the bob thing, and sometimes they nibble and they don't, bite. And then sometimes as soon as you get that bite, you got to be quick, man. You got to pop it and get the hook right there. And then you fight them a little bit, you reel them in. That catfish was heavy. I think it was about a 5-pound catfish. And he fought, man. He fought like a mother trucker. and I was just fishing off the dock. We weren't in a boat or anything. But it was a lot of fun. I really did enjoy it. And, seeing as I actually live on a lake myself, it's a pretty small lake, but it's still a lake with fish in it. And people sit out here and fish too. You can't like take a boat out on this lake that I live on, more like a paddle boat. I do have a paddle boat I can go out on, but it's not a, you're not going to get on a bass boat or a pontoon or anything like that. It's not that kind of lake. But there are fish on it. So my step granddad actually gave me a fishing pole. So now I officially have a fishing pole. I know how to bait a hook. I put a worm on there and I caught a fish with it. So technically speaking, I now can maybe feed a man. I don't know how to gut the fish yet and then prepare it, to eat and everything. But technically, if I have a fishing rod and I can get some worms, then I might be able to feed myself. That's a big step in manhood, right? You got to be able to go all the way back to the ancient basics, pre Jesus basics of, hey, if shit goes down, electricity grid goes down, we're all living in a dystopian, post apocalyptic future. Can you feed yourself? You got to have some kind of repeatable way of feeding yourself. Scavenging for berries and whatnot may not cut it. So, and you got to get your protein, even during the apocalypse, you're going to need your protein. So being able to catch fish and feed yourself, I suppose that's pretty important. I can't lecture you if you don't know how to do it because, like I said, I didn't know how to do it until this week. And that's me being a 37-year-old grown man. But you know how it is. A lot of people's childhood, especially if you don't grow up in rural areas and you're primarily in the suburbs or the city, unless you're like one of those wealthy families who have a boat and you're going out on it, then the exposure to the fishing is just not that high. I didn't live near water or anything, and I certainly didn't have any family members or friends who were wealthy enough to have a boat. So there just wasn't much fishing happening for my entire life. But fast forward, here we are, 2023, me being a older gentleman, and now I know how to fish. And so I'm pretty happy about that. I got to say, it felt great to catch a fish, bring it home, especially when there was a little bit of a fight. The two smaller fish were like too easy. Once I actually had one on the line that I had to fight for, that felt good. So I'm happy about that. Other than that, lots of good food, man. So many casseroles, had ham, two different kinds of turkey. We had corn, mashed potatoes, sweet potato casserole, broccoli casserole, squash casserole. Obviously, had some bread, some rolls. Then there's all the desserts. We had banana pudding, which is a southern delicacy. A lot of you may not know about banana pudding. And apple pie, and there was some other stuff. Carrot cake. I think there was a fourth dessert. It was a lot of food over a couple days. So, but that's what Thanksgiving is about. It's a cornucopia, a surplus of blessings that God has given us and the sustenance that we need to survive. It's an illustration that, look, God, you've been overwhelmingly kind to us, so much so that we have a surplus and that we can have this giant feast and demonstrate our thanks to you. So it's a good thing. I like Thanksgiving. I mean, even in the name, it's a be present minded in the moment of the things that we're grateful for and giving thanks. So it's one of my favorite holidays. And of course, now we're already in the Christmas season. It's crazy how that works. Like the day after Thanksgiving, you're officially in the Christmas season. And that was, Friday. So at this point, it's November 26th, and we got less than 1 month to Christmas. And as Christians, obviously, this is a big deal to us. We love this time of year. This is the time of year where even the secular world jump on our coattails because they're envious of what we have in our love for Jesus Christ, and it's celebrating his birthday. And look, let's not get into the whole pagan history of December 25th and blah 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 blah. I understand people have that argument. We don't have to go there. What I'm focusing on is the veneration of Christ, us acknowledging Jesus as God, us celebrating the time where he finally came to earth, revealed himself and his nature, and made it clear on how to have a relationship with him, and extended the offer for all human beings, not just before as the Jews with God being their chosen people and all that. The offer that he extended to all human beings being by simply believing in him that they can be absolved of all of their sins, past, present, and future, securing themselves a relationship with God for eternity far after their mortal body retires. That's the offer of Christ that is available to everybody so long as they take up the cross. Not everybody's going to do it, and that's a tragedy, but this is how it's been ever since he walked the earth. Just because the offer is there, we can't force people to take it, and we never want to resort to violence by any means in trying to bring people to it. It's the opposite. Jesus Christ preached the opposite of violence, even for his enemies and the people who were currently persecuting him and trying to nail him to a cross. He said to forgive them, for they know not what they do. Remember that? He said to turn the other cheek when they strike you. Do you remember that? So one of the other interesting things of this week, I mean, just a constant dialogue on my Instagram DMs, 24 hours a day from my Muslim and Arab followers, who I love you guys. I understand we have religious differences. I understand your faith is derived from the Quran. Totally get it. We've had a lot of great debates in my DMs about the difference between who Christians believe Jesus to be versus who Muslims believe Jesus to be, the nature of God, all of these things, the confusion over the Trinity. I actually am very, very grateful in how the situation in Gaza has connected Christians and Muslims in a common understanding of their differences and their similarities in who is the current oppositional force to peace in the world. I think there are a lot of Muslims who want peace, and I think there are a lot of Christians who want peace, and I don't see as many Jews who want peace at the time. I'm not saying that this has been true historically forever. We all know that jihad and the Crusades, we're talking about millions of people have died who conflicting over Christianity versus Islam. It's not to say like the Jews are uniquely in human history the only people who have given Christians a problem. That is not the case. You guys know that that's not the case. Hopefully you're mature enough to admit that. All religions and all races of people have been persecuted. We've all been enslaved. We've all held slaves. We know the role of the Arab world in the Native American or North American slave trade. We know the role of the Jews who owned all the ships. We know the role of the European Christians who had slaves. So there's plenty of guilt to be thrown around. I did see a good video that I shared in my stories of a Muslim individual talking about how America is essentially outing itself as, and not just America, but all of Western civilization, white nations, so to speak, are currently outing themselves as like this morally corrupt group of people based on our pattern of behavior. And he cites colonialism as the most relevant factor in that. And he also cites slavery and what happened to the Native Americans who are in America and all this other stuff. And I find that view very, very hypocritical because there are no nations on the planet who did not take their current borders in the land that they currently stand on by force. There were no occupations that were peaceful and where somebody just said, okay, you can have my land. Okay, your religion is better than ours. You can just come and install it here. That's fine with us. No, this conflict of ethnicities fighting over land and fighting over their respective faiths goes back for as long as humankind has existed. The difference between the beliefs in God or plural gods and the differences between historical cultural practices that vary across the different ethnicities and saying, look, the way we do things is better. No, look, the way we do things is better. That's been going on forever. Colonialism did not invent an expansionist empire. How do you think the Ottoman Empire collected as much of a reach as it did? How do you think the Egyptian Empire collected the the scope that it did. It did so through collecting slaves, using violence, ethnic cleansing, genocide. These things are not unique to white European nations in the last 500 years. Just because that's the most modern example of it doesn't mean that white people are inherently less moral than other people. And it seems to me like that's just kind of common sense if you know anything about history. Now, if your entire perception of the world is only reflective of the last 100 years, where America has lived underneath a Zionist occupied government, where the American people aren't even making the decisions. All we're getting in terms of democracy and representation in government of our desire is we're getting the choice between two different Zionist candidates for the White House. That's what we're getting. Israel pays for all the candidates. Nobody gets into American politics who doesn't already have an obligation to fulfilling the Zionist agenda. And that's just the way it is, unfortunately. And that narrative is sculpted using the dominant Jewish influence in the media to gaslight the population into voting for these people. And that education is indoctrinated into them, into the education academia world. That is, once again, 7 out of 8 Ivy League schools. Who's the president? Some Jewish guy. Where does all the money come from these Ivy League schools? Oh, it comes from Jewish donors who pick up the phone anytime anything anti-Jewish culture, anything anti-Israel, anything anti-Judaism is spoken about outside in public. They pick up the phone, as you see with these pro-Palestinian demonstrations on college campuses. The Jewish billionaires call up the Jewish president of the college and have these kids kicked out of the school. Yeah, but sure, there's no Jewish influence in academia. Oh, really? Okay. How about McGraw-Hill, who printed all of, like, I don't know, all, but like 80 to 90% of the textbooks used in public education? Who is McGraw-Hill? What is his connection to Ghislaine Maxwell and the Mossad Epstein agent, who is essentially just a honeypot operation to collect blackmail to be used against all of the American political institution. So it is kind of depressing once you've connected all these dots to see such the clusterfuck that we're in. But, hopefully at some point we can get ourselves out of it. I don't know that we will, but I know that many of my followers have a strong faith in Christ, just like myself, and that we know through Christ all things are possible, emphasis on all. And this isn't the first time that Jewish influence has gotten its tyrannical roots in. And unfortunately, there has to be perhaps even entire generations of people, multiple generations of people, to suffer under its influence until it eventually gets exposed and it eventually gets expelled from those societies. And we know this has actually happened 111 times before in different countries. 111 different countries have expelled the Jews from public office, influence in these major civil institutions, even so far as just evicting them entirely from their nation. So this happens over and over again, and we're just going through another iteration of it. It's 111 countries, but it's actually happened over 1,000 different times, meaning in the same nation, they've had to expel the Jewish influence in the same nation multiple times over and over again over the last several thousand years. And so America is going through its first iteration of this, its first epiphany that, man, when we let the Jews run everything, our country goes to shit. Should we let this keep happening? Should we let our country just die? Should we let our country go the same route as Germany? Is that a good idea for America? I don't think so. A lot of Americans don't think so. A lot of Christians don't think so. A lot of white people don't think so. So hopefully we can band together on those common priorities. And whether you're a patriot who just says America first, whether you're a white person who says white people deserve their own nations, whether you're a Christian that says our moral fabric and our moral leadership in America must be Christian, if you fall into any of those groups, you're on my team. You don't have to like me, but you do need to understand that we're on the same team against this Zionist occupation. And that's also true for my international followers who are Arab, Muslims, or any other faith or any other race. I'm on your side so long as you believe that Jewish supremacy cannot be the law of the land. It's currently destroying Palestine. It's currently destroying America. It's currently destroying basically every European nation. And it's creating this situation where the entire Middle East sees white people in general, because they don't distinguish between whites and Jews. They think this is just white colonialism that's destroying the Middle East. No, this is Zionism. This is a Jewish plot meant to fulfill their religious beliefs and what they feel like is their ethnic inheritance to that land. That has nothing to do with white people. That has definitely nothing to do with Christianity. Has nothing to do with the people who created America in 1620 who said, hey, world, we're going over there to the New World to spread the gospel, try to get people introduced to Jesus Christ. We're all from Europe, so that's the culture that we're taking with us. Our ideas for how to form a government and a peaceful society, they're coming from European cultural practices. And so that's what created Western civilization. That has nothing to do with what's going on in the Middle East and Israel, the modern day Jews who aren't even biblical Jews, saying that they have the right to this land and the right to practice their religion in this land, and that the whole world owes them a defense of that right, that we should all be stepping up to defend that right. Well, who's stepping up to defend the white Christians in America's right to practice our religion and to practice, or our right to defend our supermajority demographic in our nation? Is anybody stepping up for that? Don't think so. I don't think anybody's donated a single dollar. I don't think a single foreign nation has given a single dollar of foreign aid to America, maybe ever. Seriously, who is giving foreign aid to America while America slits open its wrists and gives foreign aid to Egypt, Turkey, Israel, Ukraine, anybody? Like, hello, we can't be the bank, the piggy bank for the rest of the world's priorities. We have our own priorities. Goodness gracious, you guys. It's been a while since I did one of these episodes. I'm glad it turned into a full-fledged conversation. I was thinking before I got on that this might really just be a technology testing, 1, 2, 3. But it's been a while since I've been able to talk at length, freestyle, not like sit down for a documentary interview. I guess the last time you guys got to see me on camera just speaking my mind was the interview I did last Sunday, I want to say, almost a week ago, on Night Nation Review, which was a great conversation. A gentleman named Nick, who is the host of that platform. I recommend you all go find his account, Night Nation Review, on Rumble and on Odyssey. Go support him. He was kind enough, even as a non-Christian, to platform me and even let me do some evangelization, let me share my testimony. It had genuine, sincere questions about how do Christians think? Why do they see Jesus the way they do? Where does this passion come from? What would it even mean for God to inhabit a human body? How is that possible? What are the implications? It was a really beautiful conversation. I seriously enjoyed it, and I got to respond to some difficult questions. Hopefully, I represented our people, Christians and white individuals, in a respectable way. I feel like I did. All the feedback I received was unanimously positive. So I appreciated that. I appreciated Nick having me on the show. Several of his followers hit me up afterwards saying they enjoyed it. Got some new subscribers on YouTube. I've seen a great influx of followers here on Instagram, you guys. We're talking 5,000 followers coming up within the next week, probably, maybe sooner. Who would have thought? A little over a month ago, we were at 1,000, and it had been a multiple year-long journey to get to 1,000. And then suddenly, within a month and a half, we're sitting here at 5,000. We've blown up 500%. So I owe that to you guys. I owe that to to you guys' open minds, acknowledging that I think probably half of my followers are not Christian and not white. I got a lot of diverse followers in my DMs every single day saying, hey, I agree that you have a right to your own nation and your right to practice your own religion. We respect that. We respect somebody actually standing up for Christianity. This is really interesting because a lot of my Muslim followers are looking from the outside world, from the global south or the Middle East, whatever you want to call it, and they're looking at Western civilization and America especially, and they're saying, because they're Muslim, they have a fondness for Jesus, and they're saying, Christians in the Quran are supposed to be our allies, especially in the end times, and especially against all kinds of um, godless societies, and even in particular the Jews, and especially Zionist Jews. And they're saying, hey, man, what's the deal with you Christians? Like, what happened to the people who fought the Crusades? Remember when you guys were hardcore? You do not fuck with us. Like, you don't sit here and blaspheme God and say that children can go and get their genitals cut off and whatnot. You can't have gay orgies in the street. You can't practice witchcraft in the open. All these things that Western civilization has suddenly, in the last 60 years decided are no big deal. The Muslims in the outside world are like, hey, we used to be like, we felt like we were very, very similar to you Christians, but we're watching you Christians now do things that we know, even in the Christian faith, God condemns. Not just in the Quran, not just from the Islamic perspective, but they know that fundamentalist Christians, they don't support gay marriage, they don't support abortion, they don't support feminism, they don't support idolatry, they don't support gluttony and sloth, letting our people become obese, lazy. They don't support any of that, and they know that. From a fundamentalist level, we have that in common. And so me as a Christian spokesperson, I'm over here having to take the arrows and be like, hey, you're right. I get it. I see it. Why do you think my platform exists? It's a call to action. Christians, wake up. Actually practice what's in the Bible. Okay? Be strict. We don't have to tolerate everything. We don't tolerate evil. We don't take sides with evil. We don't turn a blind eye to evil. We don't look at sin and not acknowledge it as sin. That's not the Christian way. And so I got to get my people fired up, not in a violent way, obviously. I didn't even mention before when I was talking about my 3 documentaries, I'd mentioned the third one was Serene Rights of Manhood, which, to quickly summarize, is just the playbook for men in the West who are pussies, who are, I'm not going to say godless, but who are timid with their faith, who don't want to offend anybody by saying Christ is king, Christ is the only way, Christ is the only way to the Father, and those are the words of Jesus himself. Sadly, we believe that everybody who doesn't accept Christ as God is separating themselves from God eternally after they die. That's the Christian faith 101. That's not even like controversial or confusing. But we have Christians who are so afraid of being in disagreement with their Muslim friends, or disagreement with the Jews, or disagreement with pagans and atheists. And I don't want to offend anybody by insinuating that there is an afterlife and something is going to happen. You're going to go one way or the other. And if you don't do something in your not afterlife, but current life that influences that afterlife, then you've already made your decision in terms of which way you're going. And we want people to not go that way, okay? We want people being close to God in the current days so that they are close to God in the after days, the afterlife. I'm looking out the window and there's this soft rain on the pool and on the lake. Beautiful day. Truly is. That's one of the reasons why I set up this new studio setup, so I can be downstairs with a little bit nicer view. But anyway, so the Serene Rights of Manhood is supposed to provide the blueprint and gives you these 10 things to follow for men, especially in order to live a godly, fulfilling life. And then I did that 4th documentary, Incitement of Violence, which was a conversation around political correctness and how it has been weaponized to suppress anybody who is dissenting of the mainstream narrative, whatever the talking points are coming from the White House. If you are not in full-fledged lockstep with those, then you're inciting violence. And that's true from the religious perspective of being called a Christo-fascist. That's true from the racial perspective when you say, hey, I believe in the idea that whites deserve their own nations and their own protections. They have their own culture that's worth defending, blah, blah, blah. Then that's called racism. That's called white supremacy. That's another incitement to violence. When you speak about being against some of the moral decay in society, the hedonism, the gay marriage, the transsexual stuff, the pedophilia, all of that. Oh, well, then you're called a, homophobic, transphobic bigot. You're going to call forth hate crimes and you're going to get these people hurt. It's another incitement to violence. That's what that documentary goes into. It's basically saying if you're critical whatsoever of the changing world around you that you feel is changing not for the better, if you make any criticisms of that, then they say that you are inciting violence, and they say that because you're inciting violence, they have to take action against you, preemptive action against you, have to hit you with a fine, $500 fee for hate speech, have to get you fired from your job so you realize the harm that you're doing so that they can wake you up or something like that. They have to freeze your bank account. They have to do whatever they can to get you to stop talking about the things that you're talking about. Racial realism, the reality of the spiritual differences across the religions and the fact that they're incompatible. You can't have different moral frameworks played out on top of each other at the same time without suffering from major cultural conflicts, religious conflicts, and then racial conflict. If you try to call out that we are the people creating this conflict when we push and assert that diversity is our strength, it's the opposite. Diversity is creating a tornado, a melting pot of clashes between cultures. That's a big problem. And that's what my platform exists to try to solve, to try to peacefully talk through politically, diplomatically, strategically. We can do this. It's not an unsolvable problem. Many nations throughout human history have reorganized themselves on racial and religious lines. This is not calling for war. It's not calling for violence, conflict. This is just somebody who is thinking, some people say the 30,000 foot view. I'm way higher than that. I'm sitting at the 100,000 foot view. I'm thinking about civilization. I'm thinking about entire continents trying to peacefully coexist. I'm thinking about entire religions trying to coexist. Okay? I'm trying to be the peacemaker here. I have all of our best interest at heart. You just need to trust me. I have the solutions. I know everything. I'm just kidding. I don't really have all of the solutions, and I definitely don't know everything. And even this map behind me, as I told you, there's a second draft of it coming, and there will be third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 10th, 20th drafts of this map. But we're talking about a future that is 25, 50, 100 years out. In the same way that our founding fathers set up the Constitution and whatnot to try to ensure a framework that lasts hundreds of years, that's what I'm trying to create. A lot of the political pundits you see on the internet and on the mainstream media, they're talking about like, here's the political steps we need to do to win the next election. They're talking about strategies that are 6 months, 1 year, maybe an election cycle, 4 years. Yes, people need to have those conversations. Those are different ranks in the army that we need to have people who are aligned with our ultimate vision. We need to have people having those conversations. I'm not saying we don't, but there need to be founding father-like people too. People who are thinking not 30,000 foot view, 100,000 foot view, 100-year future. How do we protect the white race? How do we make sure the gospel is preserved on earth? That Jesus Christ's teachings are passed on to the next generation after generation after generation. We need people confronting those problems, not the problem of which one's a better candidate, Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump. Do you guys see what I mean? Like, it's tough when you're when you're thinking at the level that I'm thinking. And I know a lot of this comes off as egotistical delusions of grandeur, but would people have not have said the exact same thing about Benjamin Franklin's writings, Thomas Jefferson's writings, John Adams? When these people are sitting there thinking of how do we set up the framework that's going to work for hundreds of years, I'm sure they had people around them saying, oh, that'll never happen. There's no way you're going to be able to get all the states' colonies to come together. Oh, that'll never happen. Oh, you'll never be able to get that. You guys know that that's how it was back then. And that's how it's always been. There's always been naysayers. And that's fine. Okay. What I'm trying to illustrate is that if you're hanging out with me, if you're one of my followers, we're of a different breed. We're not making the entire conversation about the present day. And even when I use the words present day, I'm talking about the next election cycle, because it seems like that's everything everybody is consumed with. But the truth about the next election cycle is, are you going to pick Donald Trump, who received $100 million from Sheldon Adelson to get elected, a Jew who's buried in Israel? Or are you going to pick fucking Bernie Sanders, who is a communist Zionist Democrat? Do you understand the false dichotomy that either of those candidate selections do not change the trajectory of America? That we're still beholden to Israel? It doesn't matter. Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. We're thinking about an entirely different category of futures and steps and milestones to get to that future. Not many people can handle that conversation. Most people are still in the mindset of like, oh, you'll never be able to do that. That's crazy. There's no way. Like, you guys are just exhausting people. So negative. Like, just get out. Like, if you think things are going shittily right now, which most people agree with me that they are, especially white people, especially Christians, especially Americans, in any of those groups of people, we all agree that things are going shittily. But then when you propose a solution, it's like, oh God, that's never going to happen. There's no way we'll get enough buy-in. There's like, okay, what is your suggestion, Einstein? Where is your draft 1.0? All you have to say is that we need to become majority white again, and it'd be better if we had Christian leaders. Wow, that's revolutionary. Whoa, I agree. How did you come up with such a brilliant thesis? It's not enough to come to that conclusion and think that you've like cracked the code for how to fix America. If you're not presenting actual methods of reorganization that are nonviolent, that can be handled politically, diplomatically, then you're a spectator in all of this, which is fine. We need spectators. We need people to hear these complex arguments. People like me articulate them, lay out an actual tangible future that you can then go and plagiarize, go and spread and say, actually, guys, there is a way where America could create a model where everybody gets to live underneath the religious or secular government that they want, and they can choose if they want to live in a diverse culture or not. That needs to be the message to the front lines that I'm passing on to all of you guys, is that there actually is a model in the future where we can get what we want fully, peacefully, non-violently, and so on. I think that's going to wrap it up, you guys. I didn't really plan on going on for an hour, but I think this was actually a very productive session. I got to talk through some pretty complex things. And I know on Instagram it's going to save it at 1 hour. So I'm going to wrap it up there, you guys. I hope you have a good afternoon, and I will see you again soon, okay? Great.